wandering through the silent rooms, tending to fires, whispering to one another, or even performing small tasks of hygiene that seem strange to us now. Fields required tending from sunrise until long past sunset and in the cold months when daylight was scarce. Monks, living in monasteries, had their own strict routines. They sometimes slept in shifts, with a few waking to maintain the rhythm of the night prayers. The practice of napping during the day was also widespread, especially for those whose work or prayers permitted a brief pause. Lavender, thyme, and other herbs were occasionally placed under pillows, though their effectiveness was more psychological than scientific. Sleeping arrangements were also influenced by social hierarchies. Even the notion of bedtime was flexible. Dreams, herbs, superstitions, and the simple instinct for warmth guided every action, creating a rhythm of rest that was wholly their own. In this way, the peculiar sleep habits of medieval people were not merely quaint or bizarre. They were essential, adaptive, and profoundly human, connecting them to the cycles of the natural world and to one another. In a shared nightly experience that has since faded into history, leaving only traces in stories, writings, and imagination. The distant barking of dogs and the occasional cry of an owl perched atop a tower or tree. The cold of stone floors and thatched roofs often forced people to rise, adjust the fire, or rearrange bedding. Such waking periods were not considered insomnia or abnormal. They were seen as natural pauses dictated by the body and the environment. The very rhythm of life, dictated by sunlight and weather, shaped sleep in ways modern people might find alien. Among monks and nuns, the nightly routine was both disciplined and peculiar. Some were known to wrap themselves in multiple layers of clothing, almost as if armor were required even in the privacy of sleep. The noise of the city, even at night, was unavoidable. The concept of napping was also highly prevalent, particularly for those engaged in physically demanding labor. In monasteries, brief daytime sleeps were allowed only under careful supervision, often following strict routines that prevented indulgence while still providing relief from fatigue. Nightmares and dreams held a prominent place in the medieval imagination. Villagers would awaken during the night to recall dreams, discuss them with family or neighbors, or even take simple actions to counteract negative omens, such as placing a small charm under a pillow or crossing oneself. While modern conveniences like mattresses, central heating, and electric lighting have changed the experience of sleep drastically, the medieval approach remains a fascinating study in adaptation, ritual, and belief. Sleep was both essential and mysterious, practical and spiritual. In imagining these routines, one cannot help but marvel at the patience, creativity, and resilience of people in the medieval world. Their nightly practices, strange and foreign as they may seem, reveal a deep connection to the rhythms of nature, the necessities of survival, and the subtle dance between rest and vigilance. And as the night slowly gave way to dawn, the world of medieval sleep dissolved into the quiet bustle of morning, leaving only the memory of dreams. In coastal villages and towns, sleep was further influenced by the rhythms of the tides and the work of fishermen and sailors. Inhabitants of these settlements often rose before dawn, regardless of the hour they had retired, to prepare boats, nets, and gear for long hours at sea. Their nights were sometimes broken by the need to tend to fires or lanterns that would guide them safely along the docks, or to keep watch for the first signs of stormy weather. Those who worked on the ships had to adapt to sleeping on narrow planks or hammocks, swaying with the waves, often while the wind cut through the gaps in the vessel's sides. Seasickness, cold, and cramped spaces made sleep fitful, punctuated by moments of alertness. But it was considered a necessary hardship, accepted as part of life. In rural farmlands, the influence of animals on human sleep cannot be overstated. Pigs, goats, chickens, and even cows were frequently kept in the same structures as humans during winter months, providing both warmth and intermittent disturbances. The lowing of cows, squealing of pigs, or crowing of roosters could awaken villagers repeatedly, but people learned to adapt, slipping between consciousness and slumber in a delicate balance. Noise traveled easily through thin walls, and nighttime activity in the streets below could disrupt sleep unexpectedly. Street cries, the clatter of carts, or arguments between townsfolk created a soundscape that required constant adaptation. Some city dwellers developed habits of partial sleep, lying down but remaining semi-conscious, ready to awaken at the first disturbance. This constant vigilance, though tiring, became a normalized part of urban life. Beyond physical arrangements, the mental preparation for sleep in medieval times was heavily influenced by belief. Dreams were considered meaningful, sometimes prophetic, and nightmares were feared as messages from spirits or omens of misfortune. People took care to follow rituals believed to protect against nocturnal evil. Crosses were drawn near beds, salt was scattered in corners, and holy water might be sprinkled before retiring. Certain foods were avoided at night, thought to induce bad dreams or restlessness, while herbs, oils, and potions were used to calm the mind and body. Sleep, therefore, was not merely a biological necessity but a spiritual practice, a time when the soul could be influenced by both protection and peril. In noble households, the extravagance of bedding arrangements sometimes reached the level of artistry. Four-poster beds with heavy drapes created private spaces insulated from both cold and prying eyes. Medicinal practices intersected with sleep in ways both curious and elaborate. Herbal infusions, poultices, and scented oils were applied to soothe the body and mind. Small pouches of herbs were tied to wrists or ankles, and ointments were rubbed on temples or the solace of feet. People learned to curl tightly, to huddle with family and livestock, and to adjust positions throughout the night, seeking warmth without risking injury or suffocation. Monks, in particular, maintained strict vigil during these periods, believing that the darkest hours were the most spiritually potent. Even peasants, though less disciplined, developed routines that mirrored these segmented patterns, incorporating brief periods of activity or wakefulness into the night. In addition to the cold, medieval sleep was shaped by unusual sleeping devices and arrangements. While modern beds offer mattresses, springs, and uniform support, medieval people relied on ingenuity. Hammocks, though less common in Europe than in other parts of the world, were sometimes used by travelers or in coastal areas. Piles of straw, feather-filled sacks, or folded cloths served as mattresses. Beds could be raised from the floor to avoid drafts, insects, or dampness. In castles, beds were often draped with heavy curtains to provide warmth and privacy, but even then, nobles sometimes adopted eccentric habits, sleeping with heads elevated, feet uncovered, or with small charms hidden in folds of blankets. Peasants, meanwhile, often slept directly on straw or rushes, sharing warmth with family members and animals alike. Night terrors and bad dreams were common concerns, especially for children. A child might have salt sprinkled around the bed, a cross hung above, or a small pouch of herbs placed beneath a pillow. These practices reveal a fascinating interplay between superstition, belief, and the practical need for rest. Oddities extended even to the use of clothing during sleep. Some wore multiple layers for warmth, while others believed that certain garments could protect against spirits. Monks performed early prayers. Peasants prepared for work in the fields or with livestock, and nobles adjusted bedding and prepared for a day of social and administrative duties. Sleep, though fragmented and filled with strange customs, had served its purpose, restoring strength, guarding the mind, and preparing people to face the demands of a medieval world. The totality of medieval sleep practices, segmented sleep, ritualized waking, the integration of superstition, communal arrangements, seasonal adaptations, and careful preparation of beds and spaces reflects a world radically different from ours. Yet in many ways, these habits reveal a profound understanding of human needs, resilience, and creativity. They demonstrate that sleep is not merely a biological necessity but a complex interplay of environment, society, and belief. Each night, whether in a cold peasant's home, a bustling town, a coastal village, or a monastery, was a delicate choreography of rest, vigilance, superstition, and survival. In imagining these nights, one appreciates the ingenuity, patience, and adaptability of medieval people. They slept despite cold, noise, superstition, and discomfort, creating a rhythm that harmonized with their environment, beliefs, and obligations. Dreams, rituals, and layered bedding were part of the nightly experience, forming a continuous loop of wakefulness and slumber, vigilance and rest. In this world, sleep was not passive. It was active, communal, spiritual, and entirely intertwined with the human experience. Thus, the peculiar sleep habits of medieval people, though strange by modern standards, were logical and essential. They were shaped by necessity, culture, and belief, and they reveal a world in which human life, even in rest, was connected to the rhythms of nature, society, and the unseen forces that people believed moved through the night. From the cold highlands to the bustling towns, from monasteries to coastal villages, each night was a journey of adaptation and survival. And as the sun rose, illuminating the world, the traces of these habits, dreams remembered, prayers whispered, bodies warmed by family and fire remained, a testament to the complex, fascinating, and wholly human experience of medieval sleep. Even as dawn approached across the medieval landscape, sleep still held its quiet dominion over those who lingered in beds, on benches, or atop straw-stuffed mattresses. In some households the night had not yet fully released its grip. A child murmured in a dream, a servant shifted the bedding of a noble lying beneath heavy blankets, and a monk quietly recited the last lines of his nocturnal prayers before the first morning bell rang. The night had been long and segmented, punctuated by movement, vigilance, and ritual. For some, the final hours before waking were the most restful. For others, light sleep persisted, a bridge between unconsciousness and the responsibilities of the day. Across the villages, the streets slowly began to stir. Roosters crowed from coops, the lowing of cattle drifted from yards, and distant voices called greetings as families prepared for the day. Even those who had slept through the bulk of the night moved sluggishly, stretching stiff limbs, rubbing eyes, and gathering warmth from each other and from small fires and hearths. The fragmented nature of their sleep, the cycles of first and second sleep, interrupted slumber, and brief nocturnal awakenings created a rhythm uniquely adapted to the demands of their world. Winter nights, long and bitter, necessitated heavy layering, shared warmth, and segmented sleep punctuated by fire maintenance or care of livestock. Even in the most extreme cold, ingenuity allowed survival, huddling with family, sharing warmth with animals, and adjusting bedding created a human microclimate sufficient to endure long hours in stone or timber homes. Sleep, in this sense, was a complex negotiation with the environment, a constant balancing act between warmth, safety, and rest. Superstition and ritual, though sometimes strange by modern standards, played a crucial role in shaping medieval nights. Dreams were analyzed and remembered, protective charms were employed, herbs scattered beneath pillows, and prayers whispered. Fear of nocturnal spirits or evil forces guided behaviors, while the simple act of waking in the middle of the night could become an opportunity for reflection, household maintenance, or spiritual observance. Sleep was never entirely passive. It was an active process intertwined with belief, vigilance, and practical necessity. As the morning sun climbed, illuminating villages, towns, monasteries, and castles, the echoes of night lingered faintly in the air. The peculiar sleep habits of medieval people segmented rest, communal arrangements, ritualized waking protective charms, and the careful adaptation to climate, environment, and superstition revealed a world in which human life was inseparable from the rhythms of nature and society. Every act of sleep, no matter how strange or fragmented it may appear, was a carefully calibrated response to circumstance, a bridge between survival, health, and belief. Even today, these practices seem alien, almost whimsical in their oddity. Yet they reflect a profound understanding of human needs, an adaptation to environment, and a seamless integration of culture, spirituality, and practicality. Medieval sleep was not merely rest. It was a nightly performance, a ritual of survival, a dance with superstition, a conversation with dreams, and an enduring connection between the physical, spiritual, and communal realms of life. In imagining the nights of medieval people, one appreciates the richness and complexity of what might otherwise seem a simple act. Sleep, in this age of stone walls, thatched roofs, candles, and superstition, was anything but ordinary. It was fragmented, ritualized, communal, and deeply human. From the warmth of shared beds in peasant cottages to the feathered mattresses of nobles, from the chants of monks in stone corridors to the restless slumber of travelers, each night was a tapestry of adaptation, belief, and necessity. Thus, the strange, weird, and fascinating sleep habits of medieval people remind us that rest is more than a biological function. It is a reflection of culture, environment, and imagination. It is shaped by cold and warmth, superstition and ritual, family and community, work and devotion. It is a bridge between the tangible and the unseen, between exhaustion and renewal, between fear and comfort. And in this intricate web of nightly practices, medieval people found rest, resilience, and continuity, weaving the peculiarities of their sleep into the rhythm of life itself. In the quiet moments when the last embers faded, when the wind swept softly across fields and streets, when families, nobles, monks, and travelers alike stirred from their final slumbers, one could almost sense the unity of human experience through the night. Each night, in its strange, fragmented, and ritualized way, connected individuals to one another, to the cycles of nature, and to the unseen forces they believed shaped the world. Sleep, no matter how odd or elaborate, was a testament to the ingenuity, patience, and enduring humanity of a people long past. And so, the story of medieval sleep concludes not with drama or climax, but with the gentle, persistent continuity of rest. First sleep, second sleep, waking, praying, dreaming, adjusting, huddling, and finally rising. A rhythm repeated night after night, century after century. In this quiet, strange, and oddly comforting world, sleep was not merely a pause from life, it was life itself, measured in warmth, vigilance, superstition, and adaptation, a nightly journey into the soft darkness that has fascinated and perplexed historians, writers, and dreamers ever since. Even after the first light of dawn began to creep over the village rooftops, the night's influence lingered like a soft, persistent echo. Some peasants remained half asleep, turning slowly beneath layers of straw, blankets, or animal skins, their minds floating between dream and reality. The lingering cold of stone floors and the faint dampness that crept into walls made their awakening gradual, almost imperceptible. Small movements, stretching, shifting weight, rubbing faces marked the delicate transition from night to day. In the forests and rural expanses, hunters and shepherds had their own peculiar nocturnal habits. Some slept lightly, prepared to rise at the faintest sound of animals in distress or predators moving nearby. The sleep of these individuals was always partially vigilant, a blend of rest and readiness, dictated by the unpredictable rhythms of the natural world. Wooden carts, hay bales, or makeshift pallets served as beds during long journeys. Even the briefest moments of unconsciousness carried the subtle tension of vigilance, merging rest with survival instinct. Superstitions influenced these routines. Herbs were placed under pillows to ward off bad dreams. Small charms guarded against spirits, and positions in the bed were chosen to maximize comfort and safety. Even restless movements or brief awakenings were woven seamlessly into the household rhythm, reflecting an intimate knowledge of human needs. Nobles maintained highly ritualized sleep, blending comfort with superstition and health practices. Feather mattresses, layers of blankets, and heavy curtains provided warmth and privacy. Some nobles adhered to beliefs that specific sleeping positions could influence fortune or health. Servants were tasked with maintaining fires, adjusting bedding, and ensuring the sleeping environment remained optimal throughout the night. In some cases, elaborate rituals preceded rest. Prayers whispered, charms arranged, and small incenses burned to ensure both spiritual and physical well-being. Night was never simply a time to lie down. It was an orchestrated interplay of comfort, belief, and vigilance. Straw and feathers were standard, but additional layers were sometimes added depending on wealth, climate, or superstition. Wool, animal skins, and cloth were layered to trap heat. In some regions, moss or herbs were incorporated for scent, insect deterrence, or protective qualities. Pillows were often filled with straw or chaff and positioned carefully to support the head and neck. While these arrangements might appear crude to modern eyes, they were meticulously calibrated to provide warmth, comfort, and a measure of safety against nighttime disturbances. Fires were tended, animals checked, and bedding adjusted regularly. Summer nights, long and warm, encouraged lighter, more fragmented sleep. People often rose briefly to observe the stars, attend to household chores, or enjoy the cooler evening air. Even the act of waking carried ritualized weight. Morning routines varied depending on social status, occupation, and household structure. Monks and nuns followed strict schedules of prayers and communal work. Nobles might rise more leisurely, assisted by servants, yet even they adhered to habits of reflection, spiritual practice, or preparation for the day. The transition from sleep to wakefulness was gradual, deliberate, and shaped by centuries of adaptation to environmental, social, and spiritual demands. Nightmares, dreams, and the perceived influence of spirits played a subtle but pervasive role in shaping medieval sleep. Protective rituals, sprinkling herbs, arranging charms, whispering prayers were common. Dreams were recorded, interpreted, and acted upon, whether they signaled warning, guidance, or divine instruction. Sleep was at once fragile, controlled, and carefully managed, reflecting a deeply human concern with both body and spirit. The strange, weird, and sometimes inconvenient habits of medieval sleep were expressions of intelligence, adaptation, and creativity, revealing a people deeply attuned to the subtle rhythms of their world. It was a bridge between night and day, fear and comfort, unconsciousness and renewal. Lavender, rosemary, thyme, and vervain were tucked under pillows or sewn into small pouches to ward off nightmares and provide calming aromas. Certain positions were thought to align the body with celestial forces or ward off malevolent spirits. Older children often slept in communal arrangements with siblings, their movements carefully observed and guided by parents. Some households followed strange local customs intended to protect or prolong sleep. In Scandinavia, travelers carried small carved figures or charms to ensure uninterrupted sleep during journeys. Sleep, in every case, was a flexible, adaptive process that reflected both necessity and ingenuity. Even in urban centers, peculiar sleep practices emerged from the close quarters of city life. Multi-story buildings with shared rooms meant that multiple families often slept in a single space. Noise traveled easily through thin walls, and lights from street lanterns seeped through small windows. As dawn approached, households slowly transitioned from sleep to wakefulness. Stretching bodies, tending fires, feeding animals, and quietly moving through rooms marked the culmination of the night. As the first rays of sunlight slowly crept across thatched rooftops and stone cottages, the night finally began to fade. Yet even as the world awakened, the echoes of the strange, quiet, and peculiar sleep habits of medieval people lingered like a gentle mist. The segmented rests, the first and second sleeps, the huddling for warmth, the gentle rise and fall of bodies against straw mattresses, all left subtle traces on the minds and hearts of those who had lived through the long hours of darkness. Each household, whether a peasant cottage, a noble chamber, a monastery cell, or a traveling cart, carried its own rhythm, a unique choreography of vigilance, ritual, and adaptation. Even in the earliest moments of the day, the residue of the night could be felt. A faint scent of lavender or rosemary lingered in the air, hinting at protective rituals completed during the long hours. The soft warmth of an animal curled beside its owner remained, a quiet testament to shared comfort. Embers glowed faintly in hearths, whispering of fires tended through the coldest nights. Dreams hovered in the minds of children and adults alike, sometimes fading quickly, sometimes lingering, offering subtle guidance or reflection. The night had left its mark, shaping energy, thought, and spirit for the day ahead. Across the medieval landscape, from bustling towns to remote highland cottages, from the quiet corridors of monasteries to the soft sway of coastal hammocks, sleep had been a delicate, continuous negotiation. People adapted to cold, darkness, superstition, and social structures, finding rest in the midst of uncertainty and discomfort. Nightmares and fears were soothed by ritual, herbs, and charms. Bodies were protected by layering, huddling, and careful positioning. Minds were calmed by prayer, reflection, or whispered stories. Even in the most fragmented sleep, there was purpose, intelligence, and intention. The continuity of these habits reveals a subtle truth. Sleep was never merely passive. It was active, communal, spiritual, and deeply human. Each night was a journey through darkness, punctuated by movement, ritual, and vigilance. The very strangeness of these habits, sharing beds with animals, arranging charms and herbs, rising for vigils, adjusting bedding carefully, interpreting dreams, reflects both the ingenuity and the vulnerability of medieval life. Sleep was a bridge between rest and readiness, unconsciousness and activity, fear and comfort, darkness and the first light of morning. As morning fully arrived, people rose gradually, bodies stretching, fires rekindled, animals tended, and quiet chores begun. The lessons of the night, the protection, the adaptation, the rituals, the warmth, and the vigilance continued into daily life. Sleep had been more than rest. It had been preparation, reflection, and adaptation, a nightly practice woven seamlessly into the rhythms of work, family, and spirituality. From the poorest peasant to the wealthiest noble, from the youngest child to the most disciplined monk, the night had shaped all equally, leaving subtle imprints of its routines, beliefs, and necessities. In the end, the weird and strange sleep habits of medieval people remind us that rest is both universal and deeply contextual. It adapts to environment, climate, superstition, social structure, and belief. It incorporates ritual, observation, and ingenuity. It blends fear, comfort, warmth, and reflection. And even in the smallest details, an herb under a pillow, a pet nestled at a foot, a careful shift of straw or feather bedding, sleep tells the story of humanity itself. So as we imagine the dark quiet hours of medieval nights with cold winds sweeping through cottages, candle flames, flickering animals breathing softly, families huddled together, monks walking in stone corridors and travelers dozing in carts and stables, we see a world where sleep is far from simple. It is rich, strange, adaptive, communal, and deeply human. It is at once practical and mystical, fragile and resilient, ordinary and extraordinary. And as the sun climbs higher, illuminating the medieval world and the people who once lived within it, the night and all its peculiarities quietly recede, leaving behind warmth, comfort, ritual, and the enduring memory of rest. Sleep, in its many forms, continues to be a bridge between darkness and light, between fear and security, between the strange rituals of the past and the universal need for renewal. Thus, the story of medieval sleep ends not with drama, but with quiet continuity. Night has passed. First sleep and second sleep have merged into the day. Charms, herbs, rituals, and vigilance have fulfilled their purpose. And in the gentle stillness of the morning, we are reminded that sleep, however strange or peculiar, is at the heart of human life, timeless, universal, and endlessly fascinating. In the dim light of medieval villages, as candles flickered in cottages and smoke drifted from chimneys, people prepared for the long hours of night. Sleep was not a simple act of lying down. It was a complex ritual shaped by environment, belief, and necessity. Families huddled together on straw mattresses, layered with blankets, furs, and cloth, while small animals nestled close for warmth and protection. The night was long, cold, and dark, and the human body adapted with segmented sleep, first sleep and second sleep, punctuated by brief awakenings for prayer, tending fires, or quiet household tasks. In the cold highlands, where snow blocked windows and wind swept through gaps in walls, families curled tightly, adjusting positions throughout the night to conserve warmth. Fires were tended vigilantly, and any lapse could result in discomfort or danger. People learned to huddle with family members and livestock, layering blankets, straw, and skins in careful arrangements that maximized heat while avoiding suffocation. Every night was a delicate negotiation with the environment, a balance of comfort and survival. Monks and nuns maintained strict schedules, rising from straw mats or wooden boards to chant prayers during the night. Segmented sleep was common, and the darkest hours were considered spiritually potent. Even peasants adopted similar patterns, waking briefly before returning to rest, sometimes performing small household chores or quiet prayers. Sleep was therefore intertwined with spiritual practice, community life, and practical necessity. Beds in castles were elaborate, with heavy curtains, layered bedding, and feathers, but even the nobility practiced strange habits. Some slept with heads elevated or feet uncovered. Some kept small charms hidden among blankets to ward off evil. Servants tended fires and adjusted bedding, ensuring warmth and comfort without disturbing the household. Even the wealthiest engaged in rituals that blended superstition, comfort, and practical adaptation. Travelers faced fragmented sleep in inns, stables, or carts. Sleeping upright or partially reclined became necessary, while small charms or herbs were kept close for protection against spirits, theft, or nightmares. Coastal fishermen slept in shifts, maintaining lanterns or tending nets, blending rest with vigilance. Sleep was never purely unconscious. It was always adaptive, shaped by circumstance and environment. Children's sleep was carefully structured. Infants were swaddled in layers, placed near hearths, while older children shared beds with siblings, animals, and family members. Nighttime cries were soothed with gentle songs, prayers, or rocking. Herbs, charms, and protective rituals were common, from sprinkling salt in corners to placing pouches under pillows. Even restless awakenings were absorbed into household rhythms, reflecting deep understanding of human needs. In some regions, sleeping posture held great significance. Certain positions were believed to align the body with celestial forces or protect against spirits. Nobles, monks, and peasants alike adjusted sleeping positions to maximize comfort, warmth, and safety. Beds were layered with straw, feathers, moss, or herbs. Animals shared beds for warmth and protection. Every detail, blanket folds, pillow placement, head orientation was meaningful, combining practical comfort with superstition. Night terrors and bad dreams were common concerns. People whispered prayers, scattered herbs, and used charms to ensure peaceful sleep. Dreams were interpreted, sometimes recorded, sometimes acted upon. Even partial awakenings were opportunities for reflection, prayer, or minor tasks. Sleep was both restorative and ritualized, an active, deliberate process intertwined with belief, culture, and daily life. Seasonal extremes dictated sleep habits. Winter nights, long and bitter, required huddling for warmth, tending fires and layering bedding. Summer nights encouraged lighter, fragmented sleep, often punctuated by reflection or observation of the night sky. Storms, wind, and rain caused intermittent awakenings, demanding adjustments of bedding, fire, or attention to livestock. Sleep was adaptive, flexible, and deeply responsive to the surrounding environment. In urban centers, shared living spaces meant fragmented, semi-conscious sleep. Noise, light, and movement demanded careful adjustment. Residents adapted, lying partially awake, adjusting straw mattresses or blankets in response to neighbors' shifts or distant carts on cobblestones. Even amidst chaos, sleep remained restorative, carefully calibrated to human needs and circumstance. The night was also a time of spiritual reflection and ritual. Monks and nuns rose for prayer, nobles engaged in quiet contemplation, and peasants whispered prayers while attending to minor household tasks. Sleep was intertwined with ritual, vigilance, and subtle attention to both body and spirit. Every movement, whether a shift in bedding, a whispered prayer, or a check on animals, was integrated into the continuous rhythm of rest. Herbs and scented plants were essential. Lavender, rosemary, thyme, and vervain were placed under pillows, sewn into pouches, or scattered across bedding. Their aromas provided comfort, protection, and a sense of ritual continuity. Pets provided warmth, safety, and companionship. Even the smallest details, the positioning of blankets, direction of the head, arrangement of charms, were meaningful, a delicate orchestration of comfort, protection, and adaptation. As the first light of dawn slowly illuminated cottages, castles, monasteries, and traveling carts, the residue of the night remained. Dreams lingered, embers glowed faintly, and animals stirred gently. The rituals, adaptations, charms, and postures had fulfilled their purpose. Energy was restored, vigilance maintained, and the body and spirit prepared for the day. Sleep, in all its strange, fragmented, ritualized, and adaptive forms, had done its work. The weird and fascinating sleep habits of medieval people segmented sleep. Bed sharing with family and animals, rituals, charms, herbs, careful postures, night prayers, and vigilance reveal a profound human intelligence. Sleep was active, communal, spiritual, and deeply intertwined with daily life. It was a bridge between darkness and light, fear and comfort, unconsciousness and renewal. Night after night, these habits shaped human experience, reflecting resilience, creativity, and an intimate understanding of human needs. As morning fully arrived, people rose gradually. Families tended fires, fed animals, adjusted bedding, and began quiet chores. Monks proceeded to early prayers, nobles to reflection and administrative tasks, and peasants to labor in the fields. Even in the transition from night to day, the traces of medieval sleep, the warmth, rituals, vigilance, herbs, and dreams remained, shaping energy, thought, and spirit. In contemplating these practices, it becomes clear that medieval sleep was far from simple. It was rich, strange, adaptive, communal, and deeply human. It incorporated superstition, ritual, environment, social structure, and practicality. Every night was a journey through darkness, vigilance, comfort, and reflection, a delicate orchestration of body, mind, and spirit. Thus, the story of medieval sleep ends not with drama or climax, but with quiet continuity. Night has passed. First sleep and second sleep have merged into the day. Charms, herbs, rituals, vigilance, and huddling have fulfilled their purpose. And in the gentle stillness of morning, we are reminded that sleep, however strange, fragmented, or ritualized, is at the heart of human life, timeless, universal, and endlessly fascinating. Families clustered in tight formations, children pressed close to parents, and animals often shared the smallest spaces for warmth. Every sigh, murmur, and gentle creak of wood was part of the nocturnal rhythm, now fading into the quiet hum of the early morning. Small pouches of herbs, charms, or coins remained close. Reminders of protection and superstition, even as conscious attention shifted fully to daylight. Even in households without formal ritual, these movements carried the residue of centuries of adaptation, a body attuned to environment, to the demands of work, and to the protection of home and family. Even the quiet presence of animals, their gentle breathing or shifting weight, left traces in the mind, forming subtle impressions of warmth and vigilance. Seasonal extremes had left their mark on sleep as well. Winter nights, with long hours and bitter cold, had required constant attention to fires, bedding, and body warmth. Summer nights, long and often hot, had encouraged lighter, more fragmented sleep. Storms or wind prompted occasional movements, small adjustments, or brief awakenings. The weird and strange habits sharing beds with animals, arranging charms, interpreting dreams, layering bedding, and positioning the body carefully were not mere superstition or habit, but thoughtful responses to the challenges of life. Charms, herbs, rituals, and vigilance have served their purpose. Even as the morning progressed, the soft echo of night lingered in quiet corners of medieval homes and castles. The gentle creak of wooden beams, the faint rustle of straw in bedding, and the muted sighs of animals still nestled in corners reminded people that night had not entirely faded. Some peasants remained half awake, turning slowly beneath layers of blankets and furs, their bodies adjusting gradually to the light of day. Each stretch, each tiny shift in position was both mechanical and ritualized, a silent continuation of the night's careful choreography. The placement of straw mattresses, blankets, and furs was precise, though not necessarily deliberate in a formal sense. Families huddled together in patterns that maximized warmth, comfort, and safety. Infants slept next to mothers, Older children pressed close to each other, and animals shared the smallest spaces for warmth and quiet. Even small movements, a turning of a head, a shift of a limb were absorbed by the straw, muffled by layers of bedding, and incorporated seamlessly into the ongoing rhythm of rest. Sleep, though fragmented and interrupted, remained restorative and protective. In monasteries, the interplay of darkness and dim candlelight created a unique environment for nocturnal rest. Wooden boards lined with straw or simple mattresses offered sparse comfort. Yet the segmented sleep cycles of monks and nuns cultivated mental alertness, spiritual discipline, and subtle awareness. Night prayers, whispered chants, and occasional movement between cells marked the quiet hours, blending ritual with rest. Even partial awakenings were integrated into a seamless continuum of sleep, prayer, and reflection, each moment deliberate, subdued, and rhythmically consistent. Travelers experienced a different rhythm entirely. In carts, stables, or inns, sleep was light, fragmented, and ever adaptable. Small pouches of herbs, charms, or coins were kept close, offering both protection and a sense of ritual continuity. Roads were uneven, carts creaked, and weather often interrupted rest, yet travelers learned to adapt. They positioned themselves carefully, adjusted straw mattresses, and welcomed the gentle breathing of companions and animals alike. Even amidst discomfort, the body learned to rest, guided by centuries of observation and adaptation. Nobles, even with the comfort of heavy feather beds and draped curtains, observed unusual nocturnal habits. Some slept with heads positioned east or feet slightly elevated, following beliefs about celestial alignment and spiritual protection. Small charms were tucked between blankets, herbs laid across pillows, and servants moved quietly to adjust fires or bedding. Nobles often reflected quietly on dreams or the subtle impressions of the night before rising, integrating night experiences into thought, planning, or spiritual contemplation. Children, especially in rural households, experienced sleep as a mixture of communal warmth, superstition, and subtle routine. Swaddled infants rested near hearths, while older children shared beds, whispering or murmuring dreams. Herbs, charms, and small rituals, like sprinkling salt in corners or arranging shoes in specific positions, helped soothe fears of spirits, nightmares, or ill fortune. Even restless or partial awakenings were absorbed into the household rhythm, an organic balance of sleep, safety, and human adaptation. Weather continued to dictate nocturnal behavior in profound ways. Winter nights demanded careful tending of fires, adjustment of bedding, and constant vigilance to prevent cold from seeping into bodies. Summer nights encouraged lighter, more fragmented sleep, often punctuated by quiet observation of stars, listening to distant wildlife, or soft conversations. Storms, wind, and rain prompted slight movements, small adjustments, and brief awakenings, all of which became part of the seamless nocturnal choreography of medieval life. Animals themselves influenced sleep in subtle ways. Cats purred softly in corners, dogs shifted their weight, and livestock occasionally stirred, each movement absorbed by the careful layering of straw, blankets, and furs. Humans adapted instinctively, learning to synchronize breathing, adjust positions, and conserve warmth. Even the faintest sighs, creaks, or rustling sounds were interpreted subconsciously, contributing to both vigilance and relaxation. Sleep was never purely unconscious. It was a delicate dance of observation, adaptation, and routine. Herbs and scented plants continued to play a crucial role. Lavender, rosemary, thyme, vervain, and other fragrant plants were tucked under pillows, sewn into small pouches, or scattered across bedding. These herbs offered protection from nightmares, evil spirits, or illness, while subtly soothing the mind and creating a calming olfactory environment. Even the smallest details, pillow placement, blanket folds, or arrangement of charms were carefully observed, forming a continuous rhythm of ritual and practicality. As dawn approached again, the residual warmth of animals, bedding, and fires created a soft, lingering comfort. Families rose slowly, stretching gently, moving quietly to tend fires, feed animals, and prepare for the day. Nobles reflected on dreams. Monks and nuns moved toward morning prayers, and travelers adjusted to life outside of carts and stables. The night had ended, but its subtle influence persisted, shaping energy, thought, and spirit. Medieval sleep, in all its fragmented, ritualized, and adaptive forms, was a bridge between darkness and light, unconsciousness and vigilance, fear and comfort. Every movement, every charm, every herbal scent, every shared body, and every whispered prayer contributed to a subtle, continuous system of rest and protection. Sleep was at once ordinary and extraordinary, practical and mystical, fragile and resilient. It was life itself, measured in warmth, vigilance, superstition, and the quiet rhythms of human adaptation. Thus, the story of medieval sleep extends endlessly into the imagination. Night after night, century after century, these habits shaped the human experience. From cottages to castles, monasteries to stables, sleep was a living, breathing, adaptive practice. It taught resilience, creativity, and attentiveness, blending biological need with social, environmental, and spiritual intelligence. Even in its strangest and most peculiar forms, sleep reflected the enduring ingenuity and humanity of those who lived centuries ago. And so, as the medieval world awakened fully to the light of morning, the soft echoes of night, the rituals, the herbs, the animals, the layered bedding, the prayers, the partial awakenings, and the dreams remained quietly in the hearts and minds of its people. Sleep, in all its weird, strange, and fascinating forms, had completed its work. Rest had been restored. Vigilance had been maintained. Comfort and protection had been preserved. And in this slow, subtle, and endlessly intricate dance of night and day, the medieval people had lived, rested, and dreamed. As the first golden rays of the sun spilled over thatched roofs, stone walls, and quiet streets, the night finally released its hold. The flicker of dying candlelight, the faint curl of smoke from extinguished hearths, and the lingering warmth of animals and blankets reminded all that the dark hours had passed. Families stretched slowly, adjusting to the soft glow of morning, bodies shifting gently on straw mattresses or feather beds, eyes blinking in the new light. Even the smallest movements carried echoes of the night. The faint rustle of bedding, a whispered sigh, or the soft shifting of animals. The rituals of sleep, first sleep and second sleep, prayers whispered in the dark, herbs tucked beneath pillows, charms carefully placed. Bodies huddled together for warmth, and vigilant adjustments of blankets and straw had served their purpose. Nightmares had been soothed, rest had been restored, and the body had been prepared for the labor, travel, or reflection of the day ahead. Dreams, fleeting or vivid, lingered in memory, offering faint guidance, reflection, or the quiet comfort of imagination. In cottages, children stirred gently, pressing close to siblings and parents, while infants still nestled in swaddling slowly adjusted to the rising light. Animals stretched and shifted, their warmth lingering in the bedding long after movement began. The subtle, pervasive influence of herbs, charms, and ritualized arrangements remained, a quiet testimony to the care with which medieval people approached the act of sleeping. In monasteries, monks and nuns moved with deliberate slowness, rising from straw mats or wooden boards to greet the day with prayers and reflection. The segmented sleep of the night, interrupted by vigils and rituals, had fostered a rhythm that balanced spiritual attentiveness with physical restoration. Nobles emerged from elaborate beds with feather-stuffed mattresses, adjusting curtains and blankets, while servants quietly ensured comfort and warmth. Travelers in carts, stables, or inns slowly prepared themselves for movement, carrying the subtle residue of night's vigilance, charm, and herbal protection. Across all social strata, the echoes of the night persisted. The quiet, strange, and fascinating habits of medieval sleep, from huddling for warmth, sharing beds with animals, arranging herbs and charms, interpreting dreams, to adjusting posture in subtle ways, revealed a profound human intelligence. Sleep was never merely passive. It was active, adaptive, communal, spiritual, and deeply intertwined with life itself. Night had been a teacher, a protector, a ritual, and a sanctuary, shaping both body and mind in ways both subtle and profound. Even as the day fully took hold, the memory of night remained. Fires were rekindled or extinguished, animals were fed and moved, and houses and streets came alive with the quiet, deliberate energy of morning routines. Yet the night's influence, its rhythms, habits, rituals, and peculiar practices remained embedded in the consciousness and bodies of those who had rested. Sleep had been restorative, protective, and instructive. It had bridged darkness and light, unconsciousness and vigilance, fear and comfort, and dreams and reality. Thus, the strange and wonderful sleep habits of medieval people, though peculiar to modern eyes, were remarkable expressions of human adaptation. Segmented sleep, first and second sleeps, bed sharing with family and animals, the careful placement of herbs and charms, the rituals of prayer, and the subtle vigilance maintained through the night all contributed to a system of rest that was both practical and deeply human. Night after night, century after century, these habits shaped life, ensuring survival, comfort, reflection, and the continuity of culture. And so the medieval night comes to a gentle close. The darkness is past, replaced by morning light. The warmth of bedding and animals lingers softly. Charms and herbs have fulfilled their purpose. Bodies and spirits are restored. Dreams, prayers, and whispered rituals fade into memory, leaving only the quiet, enduring rhythm of life itself. It is timeless, universal, and endlessly fascinating. It is a mirror of human ingenuity, resilience, and adaptability. And as the medieval world awakens fully to the new day, the night's whispers remain quietly in the hearts. And now, in the soft, quiet aftermath of night, we too can rest. Let the warmth of blankets, the gentle rhythm of breathing, and the subtle patterns of sleep carry us slowly, softly, and safely into the gentle embrace of our own dreams.